Why this tornado is unlike any other. To understand why the tri-state tornado is so shocking, you first have to understand how deeply unusual its behavior was compared to the science of typical tornadoes. Most tornadoes behave like chaotic bursts of atmospheric energy. They form quickly, weaken quickly, and often disappear within minutes. They rarely stay on the ground for long. They wobble unpredictably, lifting off, touching down again, and changing direction as the parent storm reorganizes itself. Even the strongest EF4 and EF5 tornadoes usually follow this rule. They carve a violent but broken path. But the tri-state tornado shattered every expectation. It did things tornadoes simply aren't supposed to do. Instead of being a brief moment of violence, it acted more like a long-distance atmospheric engine, moving with purpose, precision, and terrifying endurance. It carved a nearly straight path across 3 states, staying on the ground continuously for more than 200 miles, something modern meteorologists still have trouble explaining. That kind of distance isn't just unusual, it is almost unbelievable. Most tornado tracks are 1 to 10 miles long. A 20-mile track is considered significant. A 50-mile track is historic. But over 200 miles is practically unheard of. And the intensity, equally shocking. The tornado maintained violent EF4 to EF5 strength for a majority of its lifespan. Tornadoes normally cycle in strength, briefly intensifying and then weakening as the storm breathes and reorganizes. But this one didn't behave like a normal tornado. It powered forward like a machine, steady, focused, and devastating. The perfect storm ingredients. A tornado like this does not happen under normal circumstances. The atmosphere on March 18th, 1925, was primed with one of the most volatile, explosive combinations of weather elements ever documented over the central United States. Meteorologists examining the data today still describe it as a perfect storm setup, an atmospheric powder keg waiting for a spark. The first ingredient was a surge of warm, humid air from the Gulf of Mexico, rising northward much earlier and much more forcefully than usual for March. This created a vast pool of unstable air, the kind of air that wants to rise, spin, and explode into thunderstorms. Next came an unusually cold, dense, and dry air mass dropping from Canada, pushing aggressively into the warm Gulf air. When warm air and cold air collide this violently, the atmosphere becomes unstable on a massive scale. But the real twist came from above. A powerful jet stream screamed overhead, providing incredible wind shear, the stretching and twisting of air that helps thunderstorms spin. Wind shear is one of the key ingredients for supercells, the rotating storms that produce most of the world's tornadoes. And on that day, the wind shear wasn't just strong, it was extreme. However, the secret ingredient, the one that made this tornado possible, was the extraordinary low-pressure system anchoring the entire setup. This wasn't just a normal low-pressure system. It was unbelievably deep and intense for early spring. Instead of producing scattered storms, it generated an enormous, long-lived supercell, the kind of storm capable of producing a tornado with far greater stability, endurance, and energy than usual. The birth of a monster that just after 1 p.m. near Ellington, Missouri, the supercell finally released the tornado. Almost immediately, it began behaving differently from a typical twister. Instead of forming, wobbling, and lifting like most do, it locked itself into the storm's updraft, the rising column of rotating air that fuels and stabilizes tornadoes. The updraft was so strong and so perfectly aligned with a wind shear that the tornado became incredibly well organized from the start. Its rotation tightened, its energy stabilized, and its path became frighteningly straight. This stability is one of the biggest reasons it stayed on the ground so long. Most tornadoes lose energy when the updraft wobbles or weakens. But this storm maintained a consistent flow of rising, rotating air like a perfectly tuned engine. The tornado wasn't just a product of the storm, a straight-line path across 3 states. In just a few minutes, the tornado reached EF4 strength. Entire homes were obliterated down to bare foundations. Timber splinters became deadly projectiles. People described the noise as a roaring freight train mixed with explosions. But the truly terrifying part? It didn't slow down. It didn't weaken. It didn't lift. Instead, it marched in a nearly straight line through Missouri, Illinois, and Indiana, covering 3 hours of continuous destruction, 219 miles of track, thousands of structures, destroyed 695 deaths, the most from any tornado in U.S. history. The tornado moved so fast that people saw it coming but couldn't outrun it, not even on horseback. This was not a typical tornado. This was a moving atmospheric blade, why it maintained EF5 power for so long. So how did this tornado remain violent for such an incredible amount of time? Meteorologists have identified several factors. 1. A perfectly balanced supercell. The parent thunderstorm was unusually stable and sustained. Wind shear, moisture, and updraft strength all matched in a rare harmony that allowed the tornado to remain attached to the storm core for hours. 2. Minimal surface friction. The tornado traveled across mostly flat farmland, no steep terrain, no mountains, no large bodies of water, nothing to disrupt its rotation or suck away energy. 3. Ideal storm motion. The supercell moved at nearly the same speed as the surrounding low-pressure system, allowing the tornado to stay locked inside the strongest rotating column of air. 4. A classic tornado track region. Southern Missouri, southern Illinois, and southwestern Indiana sit in a corridor known for long-lived storms due to their landscape and typical wind patterns. All of these combined created the atmospheric equivalent of a conveyor belt, a continuous fuel source powering the tornado from start to finish. Damage so extreme, it rewrote tornado. Science, the aftermath, shocked even experienced meteorologists. Towns along the path were wiped completely clean. Brick schools, factories, and homes were ripped apart so violently that debris couldn't be identified. Trees were stripped bare. Train cars were overturned. In some places, soil was scoured from the ground. People who survived described homes being lifted into the air and exploding. Some victims were blown hundreds of yards from their original location. For decades, scientists debated whether it was actually one tornado or a family of tornadoes from the same storm. But modern analysis supports the original conclusion. This was one continuous tornado, the longest-lived tornado in world history. Could a 3-hour tornado happen again? This question makes meteorologists uncomfortable because the answer is yes, but extremely rarely. Modern radar and forecasting have improved safety, but the atmospheric recipe that created the tri-state tornado hasn't disappeared. The U.S. still experiences strong jet streams, moist Gulf air, explosive storm systems, high wind shear environments. And with warming oceans and changing weather patterns, some scientists think the ingredients for extreme, long-lived tornadoes could appear more often in the future. Nothing today prevents another 3-hour tornado, except luck. The only difference is we now have early warning systems that could save thousands of lives if a similar event occurred. Why the tri-state tornado still matters. Nearly a century later, meteorologists still study this tornado more than almost any other. It changed how forecasters think about supercells, tornado life cycles, storm stability, and warning systems. It also shaped disaster response planning, emergency communication, and tornado engineering research. Entire communities rebuilt with stronger structures and better awareness. The tri-state tornado wasn't just a historic weather event. It was a turning point in how we understand the atmosphere